All right, back in the van. The rain has stopped. I've got slightly wet trousers, but the sun is now out.
Standard. Beautiful.
Bloody winter.
Winter in Perth.
Who ordered it?
I think we'll be okay
For
here.
both weeks of winter are rubbish in Perth.
All 2 weeks of it, yeah.
It's the worst. It's not worth it.
Well, we've actually got some sunshine right now. This is
Yeah,
lovely.
exactly.
Yeah.
And the guy, like, with his little digger is out building, like, massive sand dunes on the beach, so that'll be good. The kids will be into those. You can get them down here.
I'm not convinced he's employed by anybody. I just think he's having a bit of fun with his digger.
Just goes and hires himself a little bobcat that
Yeah.
makes massive piles of sand.
Goes out when it rains, no one's at the beach.
Yeah,
No
I
problems.
mean, I could imagine that.
Yeah.
I
He's
can
living
see
his
that.
best life, honestly.
I think so. All right,
Episode 10.
Episode
We've
10.
made it to double figures as well. That's pretty good.
Welcome to the good stuff, episode 10. There you go. I was just saying, Andy, like
pretty
we've got some supporters to shout out.
We
So
do.
I guess first shout out goes to Crispy, who's still the top donator on Fountain.
Very generous.
So thank you very much. And then we had two new ones coming in. I think since we last did it was BundabergHodl, whoever that
Very
is.
good.
So thank you very much for your donations, much appreciated. And BTCShellingPoint. So cheers, mate.
Very good. Thank you.
Big
Very
shout
generous.
out to you guys, and Sean as well is obviously on there as a previous listener of the show. So
Yes.
thanks very much. Obviously all appreciated. Well, you know, probably not retiring anytime soon, but we'll get there.
This is greatly appreciated. It's very generous. Thank you.
Nice to see that someone's giving Crispy a bit of a run as well. So he'll have to.
Yeah, there's a little healthy competition in the leaderboard.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah. Feel free to send some. I don't know. Maybe send some like notes on these zaps as
Yeah.
well. Like anything you want us to discuss, we'll get into it. But
Comments, queries, criticisms, all welcome.
exactly. It's
Yeah.
all good. It's all good.
So, I
So-
mean, I don't know if we do plugs on this show, but like, do you want to talk about Bethans' book? I feel like there's obviously a lot of value to this for listeners from an AI perspective. So, like, do we? I'm looking forward to reading it
I
personally.
did shout it out. I could probably get you a copy. I mean, it's available for pre-orders.
It's
so I
available
guess-
for
guess I
pre-order.
can-
There we go. Yep.
Yes, this is my wife Bethans written a book.
And friend of the show.
A friend of the show, yeah, listener to the show, finds out about my like plans to go abroad for a while from the show. Yeah, so she's written a book on AI called The Human Edge, and it's not so much about AI as much as it's about like how to be human in a world of AI, and so like what's the importance. And so she teaches critical thinking, and so a lot of it is about like, well, why will you need critical thinking? How to apply it? How do you interact with these various tools and systems? And you know, how does that work in a changing world where more and more work is getting done by AIs? So it's got some really good feedback so far. She's got some good testimonials. Got a shout out from Johan Hari, which she's pretty pleased with. Maybe a little bit of manifestation there. She had like
cool.
the early version of the book she mocked up. She put him on the front cover as a testimonial.
Oh wow.
And so maybe there's something
More
about the
of
world,
attraction
world
there.
works in mysterious ways.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so that's
I'm looking
that's
forward to
on,
reading that.
on pre-order now. Like maybe I'll put it in the show notes. Like, that's the thing, isn't it? You can
Yeah, we've got show
you can
notes.
put stuff in the show notes.
I
that's
feel
good.
like it's very relevant. I feel like we've been talking a little bit around this stuff as well. Maybe not
Yep.
like honing in on it as a topic, but it kind of raises its head periodically when we're chatting on the pod, and even offline. Like, I just think some of this stuff is like super relevant for everybody. I think it's so easy for us to just hone in on the technology side and just forget about like what this means to be human. But yeah, I'm looking forward to reading it. So
All right. Well, yeah,
That's
I
exciting.
did say to her she can feel free to sponsor the pod, and and I will record an episode with her. I think we'll
yeah, that'd be good.
maybe we'll do like a walking episode. We'll go for a wander and just chat. But when she's back.
Should be done. Awesome.
All right.
You
So-
listening to anything cool lately?
Well, there you go. That's the setup, isn't it? Yeah, so obviously I sent you the Presidio Bitcoin
Yes.
podcast over the weekend. So the Presidio Bitcoin Jam, I believe they call it,
Yeah.
PBJ, which obviously I always think of peanut butter jelly,
The background
even
to
though I'm
this,
not American.
I should say, is it's born out of complete disillusionment with the All-In Pod, which was usually like a bit of a Saturday morning routine for me. Like, I'd pop it on in the car, give it a listen. But I've probably for the last like 6 weeks or so really struggled to get through half an episode, if that. Like, I just find myself clocking out at some point going, okay, I'm getting nothing out of this. Maybe every so often a little bit of entertainment value, but yeah, it's just,
Yeah.
I just was looking for better material, more interesting material.
Yeah, I feel like these guys are like all in if they knew what they were talking about.
Yeah.
Which is it's a bit dismissive. I mean, I listen to All In because there's a few guys that control a lot of money.
Yeah.
And therefore, it's useful to know what they're thinking and like where
Exactly.
like that bit of the zeitgeist is. I think for the most part of what they talk about in our, I think they're just like quite behind the curve, so I don't get too much out of it. Whereas I found the PBJ podcast was like, particularly this last week's was just really informative, and I felt that they were hitting all the notes correctly that I'm used to talking about. So it was nice to see. So I thought you'd appreciate that one.
Yeah,
so.
totally. Well, I just think what I found the All In pod to become is almost like a news reaction show. You know, like everything is just what's topical that week.
Yeah.
And
unless it's your two mates get into battle.
Yeah.
You just sidestep the whole thing. But.
That's true. Yeah. We just don't release that episode. Not something Pete and I will do on the good stuff. You know, we're just going to hit record and then hit release.
We don't have famous enough friends.
No.
Like you could be those famous friends, listener. Reach out, let us know.
Well, we don't know the guys who are
Exactly,
actually, we shouted out. They could be very famous. We just don't know.
Is Elon Musk BundabergHodl? Who
That's
knows?
it.
I don't know who that is. Like,
But yeah, so I think that's, I don't know, I'm just like being a little dismissive here, but I also just can't be bothered with so much of the news. You know, and that's,
this is not
it's just too much.
There's not the time to be watching the news. There's too much going on. Just ignore it. Like, you'll find out.
Yeah, eventually.
If the world's about to end, you'll notice when you see the
Gets,
large flash of light coming towards you.
When it gets really bright at 3 a.m., you know.
Oh dear, we just had a little laugh about nuclear
war.
But
I did enjoy that episode. I think that's my first interaction with those guys. That was, you know, I jumped on to Twitter as well and looked them up immediately because I was like, oh, these are cool dudes and they seem to know what they're talking about.
Gotta go on Noster.
Yeah,
that's where the cool dudes are.
That's true. I really do need to lift my.
You got to lift your Noster game.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I say this, but it's not like I've even got any kind of Twitter game, to be fair. Like,
well, that's why you lift your Noster game instead, because then it's like, all right, well, I've got no investment here in Twitter. So just go over here and start talking.
Just a long-term Twitter lurker.
Yeah.
But anyway, so what were your thoughts?
So
on that?
So the point. This isn't. I don't think they explicitly said this. But I felt like it was a bit of an undercurrent in that conversation, which I agree with to a certain extent as well, which was that like engineering is starting to matter less than product market fit. So there's a lot of discussion about, you know, the ability to quickly create stuff means that certainly in those early stages where, and we talked about this a lot with in the rise of the generalist as well, right? I think it dovetailed quite nicely. Was that like you can just try lots of ideas, and you can try lots of ideas across multiple different formats, be it like the creation of the prototype, the marketing material around the thing, like the ability for anybody to just step in and really just, it really disrupts that early stage venture bit where it's like, okay, well, how much money do I actually need now? And how much capital do I need to actually stand up an idea and test it and see if it works? To create new products. And I thought they were absolutely on the money with this. They were just like, all right, well, anybody that's, you know, has a good product mind, design mind, like even engineers that are close to the problem, all of a sudden they can move super fast and actually develop solutions and just see if they work. And like another thing I thought that they hit the nail on the head was around like the progression aspect of this as being like, you could have tried something here 6 months ago and you come back and try it again and the experience is just like night and day. I know I certainly had this like coming in and out of Cursor. Like I remember using Cursor a lot 6 months ago, and then like maybe a month ago I picked it back up again. I was like, oh shit, these agents are way better than they used to be. Like they're actually somewhat autonomous at this point. I can kind of let them go, and then obviously I let them go a little bit too much, and I was like, okay, I don't know about that. Rein them back in, and then let's work on how to rein them back in. And I think there's other, like I'm really into Rue code this week. Like I think there's something happened with Klein. Like there was an update on the extension. So Klein is a like a plugin I use with VS Code that would provide like AI agents to build stuff. And when they updated it, I don't know if they changed something about the system prompts or the model interactions, but all of a sudden it was just getting stuck in weird loops and not quite completing things, and various models weren't giving the sort of results that they were previously. And I thought, all right, well, I'd been looking for a time to try out RuCode, which was, I think, initially a fork of Klein. And its particular bit that it does is it leans a lot more into kind of roles for different agents. So you have modes. And you'd have like a questioner mode, and you would have an engineer mode, and you have an architect mode. And then you have the particular bit that works very nicely is as like an orchestrator mode, where you'd have a particular agent that takes the full plan, generates like a first stage plan, and then executes that first stage plan, pulls out, checks the results, and then goes into the next one. And it uses different agents to execute each stage of the plan, and that worked really well. Like, I was very, very pleased with the outputs I was getting from that. And so all of a sudden I've gone full RuCode now.
Yeah, nice.
Over the weekend, which has been interesting.
I feel like you've like hovered over maybe 3 or 4 really important things that we could probably deconstruct in this episode.
Perfect. Let's go there.
So I think I can't remember what the order was now, but you mentioned being able to just try a bunch of things, and I love this. I think this is great. I mean, we've talked about this a bunch on this podcast, just from our own personal experience of being able to spin up essentially just a bunch of different solutions to problems that we're having, and you can see what works and what doesn't. And you know, a lot of it from my perspective has been through the lens of just learning how this stuff works, which is another point they made on that podcast, which is don't wait for the model to be better in 6 months. Just start now, and you can see what works, what doesn't, and then you're compounding your own learning and development. And then when the model is better in 6 months, you will see why it's better, and you can just be in a much stronger position if you start now versus just waiting for the expectation of it being better in the future. And I think that makes sense, right? Because there will never be a point where it's logical to start if you just wait for a better future state, because it's just going to keep getting better and better. So you may as well start now. So I think that was like a nice point that was made there. But I mean, all of this comes down to just the cost of creating stuff going to zero, right? Going to near zero.
Yeah.
And
I mean, you can just cross the domains of like branding, marketing, coding, building, hosting, deployment, like thinking, like being creative, brainstorming, like it's amazing.
But this is an important consideration for someone that wants to start a business as well, right? Because there is, and maybe this is the less spoken part of product market fit, is like you spend all this time trying to find product market fit. But I think one of the challenges is also like, it's also like product founder fit and like founder market fit, and like how aligned are you to the problem that you're solving? Because I know a lot of people will just go, oh, this thing seems like a cool problem, and I do this sometimes as well. I'm not necessarily wedded to solving this problem, but I'm curious about it, so I might start exploring it in some detail. But there is an opportunity cost here, right? It's like you could go and burn 6 months of your life working on something that you don't necessarily care that much about. So I still think there's an element there where you've got to have you've got to find a way to be like well aligned to the problem you're trying to solve, so that you'll stick by all the difficulty that will inevitably arise. But I do love this notion of just being able to, you know, test and get out a bunch of different versions of a solution that you can run past real audiences. But that's only on the product side. You can also just go and build marketing campaigns at, you know, negligible cost now as well. Like we've seen tools like VO3 where people are just generating cool video content, and a lot of that stuff is going viral, and it almost feels like you can just create stuff now, and the opportunity cost of it is also dropping, because previously that might have taken, you know, a bunch of capital in 6 months of your life, and then you need to be a little bit more tactical about the decisions you're making, whereas now you're like, okay, well, I can spin this up in a couple of hours, it's worth doing that and testing it.
I like what you said there about like product founder fit, because there is like there's a game here, right, where you keep trying stuff, and you'll try something because you think there's a market there, and you'll start going down that road. And I know for me, like I can get stuck into something and then suddenly just be like, you know what, I just don't, it's just not fulfilling to do this work. Like I don't have energy here that's dragging me into this. And what's interesting is that because you lower the cost of actually experimentation here, you're also lowering that sunk cost bias as well, right? So there's you start to eliminate that, where he's like, well, you know, like I've actually only spent a few weeks, and like, yeah, okay, that was a couple of weeks of opportunity cost. Like, it's not free by any stretch, but if I've spent a few weeks and $100 on this, like, it's way easier to just move on by going, you know what, this is not where the energy is. Let's try something new. Let's try something new, and then finding the thing that actually does give you energy, that nourishes, and like it's just. The difference between those two companies. I mean, how many, like like how there's that quip about the smartest people of our age are all trying to figure out how to get you to click on a like of something. And it's just like, you know, I can't imagine that a lot of people find that like super nourishing. I get that there's probably like an intellectual challenge to the thing, and money obviously helps, but you do wonder like if they just had more freedom to explore and find something that really gave them energy that they could focus on, whether we'd have better stuff.
But you're right about the sunk cost element there, because I feel like
I'd
this
not
is how
considered
careers
that before until you said that.
Careers are kind of built that way, right? It's like a lot of people refuse to reinvent themselves because they feel like they've just got
made a
this,
decision when they were 20.
When they're 20, and then it's just compounding, and you're like, well, I have to stick it out now for the rest of my life. And it's someone made this comment to us.
I've got to be a lawyer. I've got to be an accountant.
I feel like we were like having a chat with someone offline about this recently, and they were like, I can't remember who it was, but it was almost disparaging reinvention, and I was just like, I do this all the time. Like, I think reinvention is really healthy, and it's really nourishing to the soul, and it's intellectually stimulating, and again, that's just my hardwiring. I'm not trying to project this out onto everyone else, but I think it's great. And I feel like, a lot of the animus for not reinventing is born out of sunk cost. It's like, I've just devoted so much time, effort, and energy to this. I need to keep going, and this is it. This is what my life will be.
I mean, I guess the alternative to that would be like that Scott Adams style skill stacking concept, where you talk about you know, you're better off having multiple skills and then drawing your own Venn diagram, and like you're very likely, you know, are you going to be the best person in the world at XYZ? Well, that's hard. Like, can you be the best person in the world at XYZ and ABC? Well, that's significantly easier, because not everybody has stacked those two skills together. And then the more skills that you stack and then niche down into that, well, I'm the best person at this, you know, maybe in this geography that does it this way, then all of a sudden that's something that's quite achievable to a lot of people. You can become like one of the best in the world at that specific niche.
Yeah, it's also like, I think this is where the energy part is also really fascinating from that perspective too, because it's you can almost try and be too tactical about what those skills should be that you're trying to stack. And I think when you're going into a world of like extreme uncertainty, it's like, how do you know which ones those should be from a tactical decision-making perspective? Or if you just do it because it energizes you and you're like innately interested in the skill that you're stacking, that feels like it's always been like the right thing to do, but it feels even more so when you're going into an environment where how do we know what's going to be valuable in 5 years' time? Yeah,
and you kind of don't, but like, you know, you can, there's like the amount you can learn when you're truly interested in something is like makes a huge difference. And I know like several years ago I just sort of went down that rabbit hole of like, just like, I was listening to a Bitcoin podcast and someone said the word sound money, and I was like, I don't know what that is, but you know, it sounds much better than not sound money. Like, oh, I might have a look into this, and then like, you know, years later it just emerged like from the chrysalis, and just like, oh wow, that was a lot of time and energy spent investigating that and understanding it, and you know, it pays off quite well over time, it turns out. I do think that's an important bit, but it's interesting, like, that I was able to do that because it was just captured me in the moment. And then like 2 years ago it was pretty the similar thing with the AI space. It was just like, oh right, I don't necessarily understand this, but this looks really interesting, this is a shift, let's have a look into it. And it's not even been like, I feel like maybe like a lot more of the like the Bitcoin sound money type thing was listening and watching and starting to experiment a little bit, but you know, there's only a limited amount of stuff you can do there. Whereas this like learning journey with AI has been very much. I haven't really listened to that many people's opinions on it because there wasn't. I mean, there's certain people like Kapathi's good to follow.
Yeah.
You get good insights, but a lot of the insights, I don't know. I just don't. I don't know if there's that many people that are that far ahead. Like, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And most of the stuff you can kind of gain from first principles just using this stuff. Like starting to code with AI, just for fun to explore how it worked, was like such a huge unlock. Like I really feel like of all the tools that you can use in AI, like using AI to build tools is just.
It's very empowering too.
Yeah.
You know, like I think we kind of touched on this in previous episodes where you see the results of your effort and it's tangible, but also it's fast, and then that is quite energizing, and then you dive into it even more detail, and this is great. I think this is a wonderful it's a wonderful element of learning, is to be able to manifest some benefit from it as you're doing it. And because otherwise learning can be quite dry. You could read books for years and not actually do anything practical with it, and then you don't necessarily see the net benefit of your effort. But yeah, I mean, I'm having a blast with this stuff. Like, it's just everything that I'm doing at the moment is born out of some curiosity, and I feel like a little kid again, like just discovering a computer.
Yeah.
And that's cool. I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah.
And I almost feel like there's no limit to, which might sound wild, but there's no limit to the kind of technical complexity I can dive into, because I know that what it is that I'm trying to build might be, many steps away, but I'm excited by navigating those steps to get to that end point. Whereas in the past, I would have just been like, fuck it, I've got no idea how to get to that point. I'm going to need to hire a team. I'm going to need to have like a mentor. I'm going to need $1 million of capital. Like, this is just absurd. Not going to bother.
I feel like it always felt like it was, to me, a lot of development work felt like there was some arcane knowledge that like I just didn't speak the language. I mean, I literally didn't speak computer at the time, which is part of the problem. Was like, okay, computers speak computer, I speak English, I speak a little bit of computer, but I'm not that good at its language, and therefore I just don't quite get there. Whereas like all the sort of, speaking algorithms and designing stuff and architecture was always felt almost like second nature. Like that logical aspect of the computer programming, I never found that hard. It was the sort of detailed syntactual, like speaking computer, which is always the bit. And so I just found this a massive unlock where I was like, oh shit, like it can speak computer for me. I can just do the logic. Like, wow, that saves me a ton of time. So that was like, I found that a huge win.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because like there's often been this debate about coders who can market and marketers who can code, and it's always felt like those are like, it's almost like there's this clear dichotomy there. But if you've got both skills, then like the previous iteration of this debate was like coders who can market have a superpower, and now I think it's, if you're a marketer with these tools, like distribution is the hard part, I think, right now. So I think if you've innately got some understanding of how to tap into that distribution and leverage that, then you're just going to be
I think distribution is currently the hard part, because it's just most of the people building the tools with AI at the moment are coders, like just from a who goes first point of view.
Yeah.
I think distribution, like whilst your own like personal distribution network is like the thing that I think there's maybe a bit of a moat, I think the ability to build that is going to become, just like with the code, like we can have the same sort of tooling that helps you do that.
Well, but there's also a scale element here. Like I would argue that you don't actually need to have millions of people to distribute a product to anymore. Like if you're building something for a community,
you need Crispy, you need BundabergHodl.
Yes. Thanks, guys. But you know what I mean? Like you could, if you've got like, let's say you've got a small community of 30 people, and you build something that is like, I don't know, it's uniquely tailored to those 30 people in some way, shape or form. Like I'm speaking rather generally at the moment because I haven't really thought through this, but all 30 people decide, I'm going to use this product and I'm going to pay you for it.
Yeah, that's great.
That's great. Like who decides it needs to have a multi-billion-dollar valuation? It's really only the venture capitalists. And maybe this is the nice like dovetailing of the money conversation now, and the ability to go and find product market fit much faster, I think it just like untethers you from the need to go and raise venture capital, because
Possibly.
the power dynamic shifts in like completely. If you're able to bootstrap your way to getting to product market fit, like at the very least, you won't need to raise anywhere near the amount of money that you might previously have. Because, like, what were you raising money for? You were raising money usually to hire a bunch of people and get a team in place and spend money on
certainly in
marketing.
those like angel/seed rounds.
Yes.
Like it's, I think if anything, it pushes the raise further down, and it maybe opens up different forms of capital. So again, they talked about this on PBJ as well, which was there was kind of an implicit idea there at one point that I can never remember the name of the guy on the right, like escapes me.
Yeah.
But he was saying like it's not that like debt is bad and equity is
They're
good,
tools.
which is like that is how it's kind of presented a little bit in VC world.
Well, it's vested interest speaking.
Well,
isn't
yeah,
it?
it's just what they sell. So you always talk your own book to a certain extent. But it was like I think debt becomes very interesting. Like if you have cash flows and you don't want to give away equity, you just say, right, well, I already know this works. So therefore, I can take a debt loan. Like we talked about this with Bill Withers, friend of the pod. Like in the idea of like patient capital investment of like, well, should you be investing for equity and ownership, or should the ownership stay with the company and then you invest for, debt and dividends like on a later state, or buying cash flows.
Yeah.
Various different things. I think there's different models that will come out of this, but I think certainly if you reduce that cost of experimentation up front, then there's less reason to give up that control that early, and like that's the main stage where you're going to lose like a significant part of the control of your company for what is practically very little money. And it feels like maybe there's some certainty there, but I think that's just a little bit of a mirage. Like the thing that really matters is the product market fit.
Yeah.
So if now you can iterate towards that at a much lower cost, then I think you just iterate towards it at a lower cost, and then maybe the point of the VC money or the debt or however you raise it is going to be more about the scaling. So it's like, okay, well now we have this. Okay, there's still a race to be the first and the biggest. So then maybe it makes sense.
Yeah.
Or maybe it doesn't because the tooling comes along and it's still as cheap.
But we already see this with VC investing in businesses. Like I would say this is more of a phenomena outside of Silicon Valley, but VC funds investing in businesses that are just glorified small businesses that probably don't deserve venture funding. I just think that's a model misalignment. It's not to disparage the VCs and it's not to disparage the startup that's trying to raise money. I just think that that's maybe the wrong tool for those businesses. But I also do think that like a lot of the playbook for how to build a startup now is essentially it's a playbook that has essentially been written and distributed by venture capitalists over the last like 2 decades, and now everyone assumes that's the track. And there's like a degree of dogma that's baked into this as well, but it's also been written by people who have a vested interest in you going down that track, because it essentially funnels the best startups into the system.
Yeah.
And I'd say like the one point I would make about this, like venture capital in its totality, is that it obviously functions on a power law, but there's also a power law that exists in terms of venture fund returns, and the vast majority of returns are generated by like the same half dozen funds that exist in Silicon Valley. And I think that is like, quite
Sequoia and ACZ or whatever.
Because they've got the big brands and they are able to hoover up all of the best ideas, because people seek them out for their network effect. So if you're building something that's game changing, you're going to try them first, aren't you? And then you filter down until you raise some money somewhere. But yeah, I also think like it also depends on like the market that you're actually going and chasing. And I would argue that you don't necessarily need to have this multi-billion-dollar track in order for your business to be really valuable. And then like if you're building for, I mean, I'm obviously using the hyper small 30-person community, but if you're building for a much smaller market, then it really depends on like the degree of alignment you have with that market. Like if you have a community and you're building for them, you can go and build for them. Whereas before, if it took you like a few $1 million to build your product in 3 years, you wouldn't waste your time building for such a small market. It didn't make sense. But if the costs of creation fall, like it just makes sense now. You can go and capture that much smaller market.
Yeah, I agree. Like, obviously, that's what we do.
That's what we do.
And yeah, like I think this relocalizes a lot of stuff. I think you do get a lot more people building for their local markets, and it's like we, when we discussed about, what's the job that remains at the end of all this.
Yeah.
right? And we say like, maybe it's the person that experiences the problem. And like going back to product market fit, like you can have the best engineers in the world working on a problem that sounds smart, right? Like, and this happens all the time, and it goes nowhere because they're not working on something that is actually painful to somebody, that is a problem that person is willing to pay. Like it's usually like an over optimization of something that they think should be solved, but it's just not there as a pain point in the general zeitgeist, and they're doing the wrong thing. And so the thing that really matters even now is actually understanding that, what is the product market fit, or what is the pain that I'm going to relieve when I create this product.
Yeah.
And so I really do think like that's the bit, is going to be who's the person that can figure out what the pain point is here and how we resolve it.
Yes. That's the interesting thing, though.
Halfway through that, I lost like where I started with that.
I think to your point about the product market fit element there is really useful, because if you're able to accelerate to that point, then you also build a feedback loop with real customers earlier. So you're actually able to get that feedback into your product development much sooner than you would have. Whereas I think previously, because it would take so long, you almost build up this technical debt along the way. The longer that track is to getting to product market fit, there's almost more technical debt that gets baked in over time.
And sunk cost as well, right? So now it's harder to pivot into something new completely and so on. Like I remember where we were going now. We were talking about the hyper-localization bit, and I was saying like, it comes back to that problem, and similar again, like we drag in the Scott Adams skill stacking thing as well, and you could say that one of the things that you would stack on there would be like your locality and like your particular context in which you're building something. And Australia is similar to the UK, and it is similar to the US, but it's different to both as well. And like, so one obvious niche down is just to be like the version of that in this locality. And so I think this is going to drive a lot more hyper-localized systems where somebody has the capacity to explore a problem that's very niche to that area and is different in that area to elsewhere, and then they can create the solution themselves at low cost, fit it, market it, and everything like inside their locality. Like we talked previously, like maybe a little bit hyperbolically, about like the death of SaaS. And really, like what we're saying there, it's not that like nobody ever sells software again. It's that the production line sort of market of, like 10 companies in San Francisco making all of the software that's used everywhere in the world probably goes away, because if I don't need all the engineers and product managers that are in San Francisco anymore, I can use the one that's just around the corner, and he has access to as much intelligence and ability to create these things and market it to me as they do. Then what's the benefit of going all the way to San Francisco for that? It's just like, I'll probably go to the one that's local, because if nothing else, they've skill stacked locality on top of all the other knowledge that they've had. And that's something that is very hard. Like, you can probably sit and ask ChatGPT to pretend to be in Australia, but it's not experiencing like the specific problem and pain points that I would have inside that industry. So I feel like that's one of those last defensible moments, is like, be the version of that in your own local economy.
I like that. And there's also a human element to this as well, because your locality is kind of, it's where you live, it's where you experience things with other people, they know you build a little personal brand. I feel like that trust is going to be really valuable as well when you're building product for those people, rather than going to like the Silicon Valley behemoth. You could use Pete's version of the same thing, because you trust Pete. Pete. He's building for your needs.
It reminds me of I first joined fitThe. I was looking at OB, and I think I coined the term proof of punch in the mouth, which is just like, there's a lot of different ways to secure different things. There's a lot of different trade-offs and trust models of, like, particularly like when you're storing money, that are or aren't interesting to people. But it's, if you can just walk up to somebody and punch them in the mouth, then there's an implicit level of trust there that is like, all right, this person's not going to fuck around, because they have some skin in the game, they're inside this community, like they can't just go and steal everything from them, or they can't just rip me off, or they can't just do this. Whereas this is something that I think, again, once you can produce the same software in Perth that you can produce in San Francisco, like I have this added benefit of the guy in Perth I can go to his house. Like, I mean, I'm not in the habit of going to the house of people
Yeah.
software buy, but you get the idea. Is like
Yeah.
they're here, they're in the same place as me. Like I could make their life more difficult here than I could for somebody in San Francisco. Just like, who gives a fuck about Pete?
Yeah.
It's like how politicians in Canberra care less
Yes.
about what's going on in, I don't know, Joondalup than
Exactly.
a politician in Joondalup does.
Exactly.
Like, for one of them, it really matters. For the other one, they don't give a fuck.
Yeah, that's true.
But, I mean, not that I think any of them give a fuck, but that's,
Well, there's that.
that's a different
I was going
conversation.
to say, yeah, that's a different podcast.
Yeah.
I think there's something you said there though about the death of, let's say it's B2B SaaS, which I know we've kind of made this comment a few times. It's not a glib comment either. I think it's more just about like, what do we build? Like, I think knowing what to build is also something that's going to be super important. And I feel like having that intimate contact with a particular type of customer is going to be really insightful to getting some way to answering that. But also having all of the costs of producing these things falling to near zero is also going to be really useful, because then you can just cycle through a bunch of these ideas.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's not a glib comment, because I feel like the entire B2B SaaS industry, to some degree, there are obviously exceptions to this, but it's predicated on humans needing interfaces. And I just wonder if like the world we're going into with AI is just not going to be set up for interfaces. Like it's like if we think about this workflow evolution, it was in the past, it's always human to human. It's I'm doing business with Pete, Pete's doing business with Andy, and that's how work used to happen. And then now we're kind of in this like weird environment where it's like Andy's doing work with AI, the AI is doing some stuff, and then the AI is handing that to Pete, and like the AI is in the middle. And then you might use AI to like streamline some of the stuff that I'm doing. But in the future, I think it's just going to be AI to AI. And so I
would also say, even right now, I don't think we've quite hit
it's
AI hands off the work.
Yeah.
Like, I know that there's elements of this that we've seen and been involved in, but like most work is still like AI in the back pocket sort of thing. Like it's each person has their own tools in AI, and then they use them, and then we still pass stuff around with the humans, but which I find odd in a way, because one of the things AIs will be very good at is being that orchestrator.
Yeah.
But
it's that meme, right? Have you seen this?
the
Where it's
email
like,
one.
It's the email one, right? It's like, take my 4 bullet points and turn this into like a report for Jane or whatever. And then Jane's got, take this big report and turn it into 4 bullet points. And that's kind of the relationship with AI at the moment, I feel.
Yeah.
But I just wonder if we just end up in this world where it's just AI doing work with AI. And, like, I remember this from like 20 years ago watching Entourage. Did you ever watch this show?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, and there was like this scene, I still remember this because I think it's like, what's the main character's name? It's like Vinny Chase is like the star of the show. And he's talking with his financial manager, right? And his financial manager sits him down and he's just like, Vinny, you're broke. Like, what are you doing? You've got to stop spending all this money.
Yeah.
And Vinny's just like, what do you mean I'm broke? It's your job to make sure I've got the money in my bank account. And I was also always like, I always kind of had this view that this was where technology would take us. It's like we would just all
Everyone
have
would
the
be broke idiots
well,
spending
there's
too much
more.
money.
Well, there's that. But like,
I can see the rain coming in. I'm just going to shut the door.
there we go. We'd get to the point where like I wouldn't just need to be looking at a banking interface all the time. The money would just go to where it needed to go. It would pay off the bills. It would pay off the debt. Like, obviously I'm doing things bringing the money in, but I'm not playing with that interface constantly.
Yeah.
It's like having the virtual financial manager just sat there in the back pocket doing all of the stuff.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like that's the non-interface approach to this. It's just happening behind the scenes. The plumbing is there for it to happen, but I'm not there interfacing with it all the time. Obviously, you'd hope it's not allowing you to get to a position where you're broke, and then you're like, chastising your financial manager for allowing it to happen. But yeah,
Good timing on shutting the door.
that was perfect. Yeah, we're actually getting a little bit
I
of
could
rain.
just like had a look out the window, I could see the rain coming over the sea, and I was like, you know what?
Perfect.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. Like, and I think that feels intuitive as well, right? So you can see it going that way. That like the best user experience is just somebody else that you trust does it, and they do it well.
Yeah.
Like, so, and
In theory.
there doesn't feel like there's a lot of barriers to this. Like it feels like all the bits are there, and this is an area I've been spending quite a lot of my time and product development in at the moment, is around the user interface of working with these agents, and in a way where it's less driven by the human. And so like the AI has like specific goals in various different contexts, and in that context then it fixates on its goal, not necessarily what you're saying.
Yeah.
And it can drive the conversation, because I find it a little bit odd in a way that and maybe it's just because the chatbot interface was like the first one that took off, but it's very like call and response from the point of view of the human. You know, it's very rare that like, you know, ChatGPT opens a window to you and asks you a question.
Yeah.
But in many ways that might be more appropriate, because it could be responding to a lot more things than you can in any particular time.
Yeah.
And otherwise it means that like you have to always be on the front foot to like push that conversation forwards.
Yeah.
And so obviously with the stuff I'm doing with Beacon at the moment, like a lot of it needs to be around, you almost want like what I sometimes term as like the opinionated AI agent, that like it has a place it's trying to get to, and maybe it needs some information from you along the way to complete its task. And it's like, how do we define and then run those tasks in that sort of environment? So I think I'm there with like what I need for it to do anyway. So I'll be getting that. And so like I think we'll be live with Beacon in the next couple of weeks, and then I'll talk about it a little bit more on the pod. But
tease it out. Yep.
Yeah, it's been very interesting, and like I think we can make it do some quite fun stuff. And hopefully it's written or designed in a way to be more, I don't know, like agnostic to any particular system you'd then want to put that into. So I'm trying to think of it more like a protocol than anything else, although I haven't really gone down the path of doing all the protocol definitions and whatnot. But I think that's the way to think about these sort of things, is like, okay, this could be a really useful protocol for how we create like opinionated agents that can do stuff. And then we take that and then put it into some interesting use cases. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is odd that I'm surprised we don't see that a bit more. It's not an what's the word? Like, it's not an opinion that I feel like I see a lot. Like, I don't know who knows this or who's had that. Like, as I quoted on Twitter the other day, I actually gave Aaron Levy some kudos. I was like, he's been putting out some bangers recently. Like, I don't know, he's got a good AI agent writing his Twitter these days. Like, but like he really does look like somebody who,
you can see the evolution.
His company is using this stuff like in anger. That's what it looks like. Is it's like I remember like maybe about a year ago, like seeing some of the opinions and being like, yeah, okay, I don't really agree with that. Like, I think you're off there. But like the acceleration of, like, as I said, his banger tweets over the last few months is, I'm like, yeah, these are good. What's weird to me is they never show up in my main feed. They're always in like one of those little boxes where it seems like the carousel. And it's like, I don't follow the guy. Like, I don't know. I interact with them. I don't know why that is. Yeah. But I blame Elon.
Yeah, I feel like since he went on...
I blame Aaron. He should be on Noster. What's he playing at?
He should. Yeah. But I feel like since... I think there was a point earlier in the year, just to cycle back to the All-In pod, where he was on the All-In pod, and they were talking about some of this stuff. And I just feel like he's gone on a journey since then. Yeah. I wasn't sure I necessarily agreed with everything at the time that he was saying, but yeah, I feel like now he's just... Yeah, he's figured it out.
And I think the guts of that is he's actively using them in his business.
You can tell.
Because they did one of those statements where they come out and say, oh, we're going to be AI first. And you go, okay, well, we'll see where this goes. But like, it's one of the actual test cases where I actually think they've done it. Like, I don't know. Like, I haven't seen, I guess I don't know if I follow the guy from Duolingo, but like, I don't see anything about what is happening at Duolingo.
Have they walked some of that back? Was it Duolingo that did? Someone like felt a bit of public pressure to walk some of this stuff back.
Oh, really?
They did a little bit. Yeah, I'm not sure if it was Duolingo or someone else, but I mean, there's been a bunch of those memos now that are all quite similar. But beyond that, I haven't seen anything. Yeah. But yeah, do you think, like, I'm kind of just off the product market fit chat. Like, do you think, like, I'm curious to get your thoughts about how like Bitcoin will impact some of the decision making around like what to build, how to build, whether you take venture capital, Like, what do you think? Do you think we'll just like see more businesses just like operating on a Bitcoin standard instead, because it's just easier to get started now? You don't necessarily need to go through venture capital as like a rite of passage, and therefore you've got more tools, more capital, more financial tools at your disposal to get underway. And then do you feel like Bitcoin has a role to play there?
I feel like it does, but like in a way that's going to be completely unsatisfying to most people. In a way, Bitcoin is like your rich, miserly uncle, in that like it holds out this promise that like if you're like good and you do the work and you earn some money, then over time you will become richer.
Yeah.
Like in the way that like you could have this, imagine this miserly uncle that says, no, you've got to act properly and you've got to do this and this and this, and then one day I will leave to you this inheritance. Like that's a little bit like how Bitcoin is. Like there's nothing immediate about it.
Yeah.
Like you don't get this like, it's not like a shot of dopamine.
Instant gratification.
Yeah, that you get with shit coins and all the crap fiat nonsense. But it really, really, really does reward staying humble and stacking sats.
Yeah.
Shout out, Matt. Let's go a shout out everybody so I can tag them all when we put the podcast out.
Good thing.
Yeah, exactly. Marketing.
Yes. Via marketing.
We need to do this. Robot, Everest, can you go do that? Yeah, so in terms of like how it's going to play out, I mean, I think it plays out like we've outlined in our up, down methodology, which I'm not even really sure we've talked about much on this.
We haven't actually, no.
Podcast. Maybe we should. Okay, well, that's one for next week.
Yes.
Everest, remind us of that. Is like it's up, down, right? Up is margin, up is capital, down is risk, and like the first thing is like AI is all about the margin. Like get the margin up, give yourself space to room, start making like more from your cash flow right now. Get your head straight, and then build like a long-term capital reserve, which is where the Bitcoin comes in. So I think in terms of like what it does have is that ability to say, earn money now that is then worth more in the future.
Yes.
So if you can get product market fit earlier and you can get cash flows earlier, then those cash flows could be very meaningful in the future, particularly if you don't have to scale your team. Right? Like if you can just keep a very, very lean team and just run positive for a while, and particularly if you can then move quickly and get into spaces where there's money to be had, like you can put a lot of money down that you don't need to spend right now. And then in 4 years' time, as you're growing and scaling or dealing with something else, then it could be that you already have all the money anyway. So it's not obvious to me that it like, necessarily changes everything about investment and growing the company, because like there's still money there, right? It's still the environment is that there's a bunch of cheap money that some people have access to. I find that corrupt, but it just is the world that it's in, so you need to be aware of that and play that game if you want to. So, but it does give you the option of just running like a positive cash flow business hard, and then not needing to sell, not needing to sell out. I mean, if nothing else, you're in a much better bargaining position if you do.
Yeah, I guess like part of where the question is coming from as well is I've been seeing more of this this point of view that we'll see more one-person billion-dollar companies. I know like this is something that people have been talking about for a couple of years, but I've seen this come out from, I think Claude's founder, Sam's talked about this in the last month as well. And it kind of did get me thinking a little bit about this. What I don't understand about it is like it's the $1 billion part, like that like arbitrary metric, whether or not it's even achievable in like this state where like the technology is hyper deflationary. This is kind of like an extension of the value trap.
I think it's definitely achievable and it will happen.
My point is
nothing
like
else will just destroy the value of $1 billion.
Yeah, my point is it just a short-term arbitrage play? Because as the value trap kicks in, if you have a business that is essentially creating outsized returns, then you just encourage more competition to emerge to compete those away. How does that impact your longer term valuation as you get this mean reversion in the final part of the curve? And my point is do you want to then just capture some of that some of that growth in the earlier parts of the value trap in Bitcoin, so that you actually are shifting your.
Absolutely.
So that's the animus.
See episode 3.
That's the animus for me. It's like, is this valuation just
Yeah.
an arbitrary, like, static point in time now?
Yeah.
And does it really matter all that much longer term if we're just going to see massive amounts of mean reversion?
I could imagine, like, if I think about it from the value trap point of view, I hadn't considered that when you asked the question, but that's good framing. It's not obvious to me that I even want dollars by the end of that.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, I think when I think we've done this in over, I think it was episode 3. Maybe it was the end of episode 2 that got lost.
It might have
We
been,
went
yeah.
into a lot more detail, and it was amazing. It was
was
probably
incredible,
like the best exploration of this you could ever have had, but it's all lost. And then we did like a little brief recap at the end on episode 3. But it was, it's, if you like start to just take the cost of so many things to zero, like, it's gonna be really hard to deal with that. And the flow-on effects of, like, right, well, your ability to earn new revenue starts to go away. So you're not earning tons of revenue. Like, if you're earning less revenue, then your valuations come crashing down from those things. So yeah, you could be $1 billion company and then you're a $100 million company. Yep. I mean, if there's only one of you, you're fine. But your valuation has shifted. But I do think the thing what you want to do is, take that money and put it away somewhere, because the second order effect of, like, what that sort of shift does to society, and then what a government response to that is, I just don't think you want to be in those assets that can be easily manipulated. That's something that's hard to take from you, that's scarce.
Yeah, I agree.
Multiple.
I think that's right. But also, like, this is where the animus for a capital allocator is really crucial as well, right? If you are investing in these businesses, but your valuation goes from $1 billion to 100 million, well, that's going to have some pretty nasty flow-on effects for the fund if that starts happening, like, across the board. So at that point, it's like, how much VC money do you want to keep taking? How are VCs working out how to allocate some of this money in that environment? And what does it mean for the founder? Because, you're essentially raising money to scale this business rapidly, capturing that market share in order to improve the valuation. I guess my question is, like, is it not just better to capture some of that as Bitcoin and basically earn it in the short term so that, it compounds over time? And does that outperform?
I think just earn money now in Bitcoin and keep it. That's the play. That's literally the trade of the next 10 years is use AI to earn more money now and then keep it in Bitcoin.
Yeah. Interesting.
It's not one that's easily accepted by a lot of people. I mean, I had some feedback the other day, which was that, like, it's, you like, sometimes you've got to speak to people where they're at, and, like, particularly, like, I'm just kind of listening in my head to this, thinking, like, who's listening to this and cares, if you know what I mean. But like, there's definitely the idea of, like, I would like my business to exist still in the future, or I would, I have a small business, I want to do something with it, or I'm trying to build a new business, like, how do I approach this? And I think, like, like, unless you're, like, in that world, like, if I come up to you and said, like, what, so many times people said, like, what's the main impact of AI and what do I do about it? And I said, okay, well, step 1, buy Bitcoin. And they're like, what are you talking about? And it's like, I could like just take you on this, like, 10-hour journey where I explain why the end point to this is buying Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But, like, neither of us have got the stamina for this. Like,
True.
You're not ready to hear it. You're not there. I wonder how you get that across to people. But yeah, like, I think that's the play. It's the thing that you've got to be aware of is that this is a shift.
Yeah.
It's like a transition in what work is going to look like. I think it's going to be very disruptive. I think there's still work after it and there's still work before it. So there's opportunity now, there's opportunity later, but if you get caught out on the wrong side of the shift, then that's where it all goes badly. And the ways to deal with that are to go early and experiment with the tools, to learn how you can adjust your business to be AI first, because it's going to allow you to operate with less people. So less people are required to do stuff, so you can do more stuff. Doing more stuff makes sense to people. The more stuff you can do, the more money you get. Right, do that.
Yes.
Step 1. And then you've got to think about, like, look, I just don't want to lose all that money. And like it's weird to think that like, okay, the government's going to come along and they're going to create so much more money that the money you had previously isn't worth what it was. But this does happen.
Yeah.
So keep it somewhere else. Like, and my view would be use Bitcoin. I think everything else is just a bet on something that's massively speculative. And it's weird that I feel like Bitcoin's got to the state where I can probably publicly say that now, that I don't feel like it's massively speculative, that Bitcoin will still be here in 10 years, will still be massively scarce, and will be used more. Like, that feels like it's just a march of progress now.
Yeah.
I feel like almost every other cryptocurrency, or shitcoins as we call them, I don't think that's the case. I think they're all just flash in the pan.
Yeah,
like they're all trying to like do something useful, and like missing the point that the useful thing of money is being money. It's not like you don't need your money to cook your eggs. Like, that's not like, if you want your money to cook your eggs, what you do is you go and use your money to pay for the person to cook your eggs. Like, it doesn't need to do the thing. It just needs to be money. Like, money is useful. You don't have to find use cases for money. Like, that's ridiculous. But
agreed.
You know, it turns out it's a good sell to people if you're trying to scam them. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree with this. You're preaching to the choir here, so that's fair. So there were a couple of other things right at the start that you mentioned. And I guess, like, I don't know which way we want to take this, but I think you touched on like experiences as well, like, well, maybe this was our offline discussion.
I feel like
it's all molding together.
Yeah. What we talk like
the value
and don't
of
record it. What the hell?
But also you kind of touched on, I think, a multi-agent system as well. That approach you started to articulate a little bit.
I reckon we get into that another time.
It's probably a whole episode.
Like, I thought we might have done it today, but I think I like where we went with the product market fit thing. I mean, multi-agent systems are interesting. I think the experience of stuff, to me, like the way to tie that into the product market fit is that product market fit is really about trying to put yourself in the role of a set of customers that have a problem, and to articulate that problem well enough that you can build the solution. And so, like this, like as we said on previous podcasts, like it's the last thing standing.
Yeah,
is just be the person that experiences life and understands the problem enough that you can then work with these tools to build it, market it, get it out there, scale it, whatever you need to do. Like, the tools are just going to help accelerate you. And you can do that as a one person, you could do it as a team. Like, I mean, we talk about one person companies all the time, but like, there's a reason why we're not a one person company.
Yes.
That it's actually nicer to have somebody else on.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, so, I mean, even if you don't do the same things, or like you work on your own projects, like, you know, like I can imagine people just being in clubs where they're just like, yeah, let's just be like a little collective of people that solve stuff. And, you know, let's just go do things.
Yeah, like, and it's energizing. You bounce ideas around.
Exactly.
And
it's just more fun.
Yeah.
So I think that would be how I'd bring in like the experience angle of it. Is it's just, and then particularly that plays nicely with the hyper-localization, because it's that skill stack. You've got that extra localization on top of whatever else is available to you, because everything else becomes commodity.
Yeah.
And then the other bit about multi-agents, like it's.
Well, do we want to just hone in on this experience piece? Like, I feel like we talked about it. Maybe it was offline.
There's one thing that just keeps coming up in my head that because you've been in the middle of stuff, I'll just blurt out.
Okay.
Is that like when I said like one massive like learning point for me was actually like experimenting, like and building tools with these things and seeing how they were working and the responses and stuff. That was huge. Was actually building them into workflows, building my own workflows, building the next set of things. And like one of the next things that was a huge one from a learning point of view was actually building multiple agent systems that talk to each other and accomplish tasks.
Yeah.
Was huge. And in particular, like just doing that and just like looking away from the cost.
Yeah.
Because like one of the, like particularly like early on when you're doing this and you're doing it on your own models and just like watching them burn money for stuff that doesn't work and testing it in like on production like APIs and just seeing what happens. Like it's weird because you have this aversion where you're like, oh, I can get as much as I want for $20 a month, which you can't. You're actually getting like limited in various ways. But when you just let it go raw and you see like the cost of like everything that it's doing. There's so many you would look at it and go, I can't believe you spent like $2 on that. Like, but a human would be spending $2 on that like all day long, like, and you just wouldn't even know. But it's just like, yeah, it's interesting when you actually let the things go inside a playground and just see what they can come up with, and like see how they can formulate plans, and then that those plans can go on and drive something else. And that's like it's clearly like where this is going in the future. Again, there's an interesting Aaron Levy tweet. So, you know, credit where it's due.
Yeah.
And he talks about like, you know, one of the big things is going to be understanding like how do we like manage and monitor these things, and just like as the owner of capital in a business, right? Like you've got to be thinking, if these things are going to do work on my behalf, like what does that look like? Does it look like they just do the work? Do they do it once? Do they do it 100 times? You know, like this is kind of interesting. You can just set stuff off, let it go. Like my own coding workflows will often just be thrown away. It'll just be like, okay, your job is to experiment with this. And you get to the end of it and you go, it was a bad experiment, right? Done. Like, it's gone. Like, we'll never talk of this again, but I know not to go down that path. And so like the way you interact and use these things changes, and you don't, you know, it's not like a one shot, and I don't know the best way to explain it. So maybe we focus on this next week after a bit of thinking, but it's a huge learning unlock. It's actually just put the money there and go, all right, go. Like even if it's just like two AIs like just talking to each other in Discord or something. Like the first time I did that, I was like, oh, you guys are just wasting my money here. Like just watching them ask each other if they're an AI robot and saying thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'm like, stop saying thank you. That cost me 5 cents.
Yeah, I think that's I mean, you kind of see this anyway, just with all of the tool costs just racking up. It's like how you got half a dozen things costing you $200 a month. Going, oh god.
But if you spend a ton, it's amazing. It's
worth
it. They can really get stuff done.
Yeah.
But you're like, God, I've just spent like, I might spend $20 on that query. Is that like really? But then you think about trying to achieve the same, because I built like early research. I was reading the Claude paper on their research agent design, and I built versions of this like, I don't know, 8 months ago. But I remember thinking like, is this even like a viable, like, is this a business model here? Because if I run this and it costs me like $4 or $5, like how do I pass that on? Like, how would I do it? Would anybody want to pay $4 or $5 to do this sort of research? And then you're like, well, actually, like if I had to get somebody to do it, it would cost me hundreds of dollars. Like even like I probably can't even do that. There probably isn't even a market for people that just pick up very niche research topics and give you feedback. Like it's just
also, I think it really depends what it is you're trying to achieve with the multi-agent system as well. Like, I think research is like a really good use case. This is the parallelization aspect to it, right? It's like if you've got a bunch of tasks that operate in parallel, then it's okay. You can have an orchestration layer agent that is, but like research, right? It's like you've got a bunch of different tracks you want to go and research, and an agent can go and research one of those tracks and just keep researching one of those tracks. And then you can synthesize all of that, the findings, via an orchestration layer agent. But let's say you're trying to analyze a contract. You probably don't want to have a multi-agent system in a contract, because you want them to be able to, like the clauses in a contract are going to, you kind of want the context of the complete contract. You don't just want to have like a bunch of agents exploring one component of the contract.
Yeah.
So I feel like that would be less of a valuable use case than research, which works really well.
I feel like we keep saying, we'll not talk about this. We're clearly interested, so let's
can talk about it in more detail.
Like, so what I've been developing is like my UI version. Well, it's not even UI. Well, UI feels like a bit of a misnomer because it's all text-based, but like it's kind of like an interaction framework that I refer to as flow, but it broadly breaks down into giving the agents a set of instructions that they go through with exit criteria on a step. And the idea is that like it can be trying to achieve something until it feels like it's achieved, and then like it's not necessarily the same AI that then checks the achievement. There's a different thing that comes in and orchestrates that. But it allows you to then, this is why I don't have a good descriptions of it, like it allows you to like I don't know, like have like a back and forth dialogue with something to understand like what is it we're trying to achieve here, or like how much more of this should I be reading, or have I already got the data that I needed? And like we talk about this like in terms of like sales, like robots and those things, right? But like, you know, like what you want is you want a flexible way of extracting information from people. So like the SaaS version of this is a form that says, please fill in this form that tells me like who you are, like how much you're trying to spend, like what you're trying to buy, and so on. And that's just a bit confrontational. The human version of that is that the human has all of that in his head. It's like, right, I've got 5 things that I need to get out of this person. But they start by going, hey, how you doing? Like, what do you think of the weather? And it's got like nothing to do with it. And then eventually through the conversation, they'll extract the data. And then as they extract the data, they've done that thing, and they're on to the next one. It's like, I'm going to extract all that data. Once I've got that data, then I'm going to lock you in on a meeting. And you can define this sort of flow, and it gives like agency and purpose to that agent to then say like, okay, well, what I want you to do is you're in at the moment the data gathering process. So call the data gathering process, and the particular set of data you need are points 1, 2, 3, 4 that are defined by this schema of information, and you're in that process until you've got those things, or until you burn like 10 different, you know, loops, or something like that. And then you let that play out, and what you see is that then you get this quite natural interface where somebody says like, all right, I want to do this, and you say, oh, okay, if you're going to do that, I just need a few different things. So like, what about this? Like, oh, okay, it's that. You know, what about this? It's that. What about this? It's that. And then you've got enough information, then all of a sudden it switches into a completely different mode, and it's like, okay, well now we're going to go do the tasks. I've sent that off. I've done the thing. Like, here's the receipts for everything I've done. And you're like, huh. So you can imagine like booking a flight. You say, oh, I want to book a flight. And it's like, oh, okay, cool. All right, well, my flight booking framework is kind of like, okay, well, where are you going? When are you going? Who's involved? Like, how strict are the dates? Like, do you care if you go on that particular date, or could you go a few days either side? Like, do you have frequent flyer points and whatnot? And this would be an ongoing dialogue for a while, and then it would just go like, okay, I've done this. Like, then it's suddenly bang, okay, I've got everything I need. Now it's good enough. And even you could do tests of this, right? So it becomes I'm still querying you to understand what you want, but based on the information I have right now in my frame, this is the best result that I've got. So are we close?
Yeah. I feel like that example's good though, because there's like a natural limit. You're trying to book a flight. There's only so much information you can go and find. So I was using Claude's research for content writing because I wanted to build that into a workflow that I'd been playing with, which I think maybe we touched on last week. And so in the first instance, I used it in this like example that I was using, which was find blog post topics that would be relevant for a digital agency, you know, that's doing X, Y, Z. And I laid out the service lines, and then, it then came back with like, you know, thought for like 3 minutes, came back with like 50 different topics. And I just picked the first one. And then I was like, right, okay, now research like this topic in detail. And I didn't look under the hood for the first step, admittedly. The second step I did. And it spun up like 6 different agents to go down different tracks. And it thought for like 10 minutes. And I thought, great. But while I was watching this, the thing I realized was like, it didn't know where to stop. Like it blew past where I thought was like a perfectly normal or appropriate amount of information and just kept going.
Yeah.
And like, I was almost tempted, like, you know, when it was ticking over 10 minutes, I was like, I kind of want to stop this. This is too much. Like, and it can see what it's like, the links it's churning through as well. And whereas it didn't feel like I could do anything at that point to go like, how do I put some guardrails, some constraints around the types of information you're looking for here? Admittedly, I left it super broad. This was an experiment. But I like the example you're giving, because there are natural like off-ramps here. You just get the information that are going to be valuable to going and booking that flight, and you book the flight.
Yeah, and it's just a way of dictating to the AI like what its goal is in the moment. Like, your goal here is book a flight. Yeah. And to book a flight, there's several steps that you're going to go through, but they're all going to be like very loosely coupled and broad. Yeah. And they might not come through in a particular order. Like it's not that you have to say, what's your name, what's your name, what's your name, until you get my name. It's just be aware that you're not going to exit this step until you know name.
Yes.
So you could start with the weather, and I say, oh yeah, hi, my name's Pete, and okay, I've got name. I'm not going to ask him about his name. You already know you've got that. Like this is like, it's a very, like I'm trying to define something that's quite like a human way of interacting.
Yeah.
But I really do feel like at the moment we set everything for the agents via either like a standard system prompt, or we literally write it in every time we ask a question. But it really does put the onus on like the human in the moment to tell the AI what to do in a way that I find entirely it's just unnatural.
Yeah.
Whereas like, you know, if you've got a teacher, for instance, so there's another area that I'm exploring is like teaching frameworks for this, where if you have a teacher and you hire a teacher, you don't, when that teacher turns up, you don't say, all right, I just want you to act like a teacher and tell me this. You know, the teacher says like, all right, you've hired me to instruct you how to speak French, so the way I'm going to do that is this. And they have like a bias, and they have like they have a bias for what they're going to do. And they have like an agenda for how they're going to drive the conversation forwards that you just don't really see in, like, say, ChatGPT and Claude and whatnot, in that environment, because it's always user driven.
Yeah.
It's always the user pushing the thing. It's like, well, I think there's a space here for what are the machines that then push the user through the process, and how does that work, and how does that interaction work? And I think the other end of that is like almost going to be the best UI we're going to see in anything, because then you have like you can say to the computer like, oh, we're doing this, and it goes, right, I'm going to go and get that flow off the shelf, which is sort of how it works under the hood. All right, I'm in that flow, and you can exit at any time. Like if you start talking about something different, it realizes that you're talking about something different and moves into something else.
Yeah.
But it'll have like a stored in the background, like, all right, well, I'm part way through this flow, so if he starts talking about flights again, I'm going to come in and I'm going to pick up that information and store it in this flow. But yeah, it lets you have this machine come in and start dictating, like with a bias and an agenda, like where the conversation's going to go, because you've said you had a goal. So you say, like, all right, I'm trying to book a flight. Can you help me? Like, yeah. I'm trying to pay somebody with my Bitcoin wallet. Can you help me? Yes, I can do that. Like, these are all different types of flow that we could get into. I want to learn about this. I want to know about that. I want to organize this thing. Can you organize the thing? Yeah, I can. Yeah. And then now I'm going to reach out to 5 other people and start telling them what to do. Like, and then you end up with something that's like a high agency human. It's just not. I'm like that. I think that is going to be like the ultimate UI that you get, is like, oh, shit, there's this like high agency human that can talk to me, and he knows what's going on, and he has ideas about what we should be doing. He doesn't need me to tell it what's going on.
With memory.
With memory.
Yeah. There's that personal knowledge graph that you're just building up over time.
Took away everything. I think this is going to be, and then I'm really excited about the beacon stuff. This is the thing that gives me energy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
totally.
I need to. It's just hard right now. It's the same. Like, it's just, I don't have any time with the wife being away and kids, but it's okay.
We'll get there.
We'll get there. It's close. It's close.
Yes. I mean, I feel like there's also this discussion around experience and taste as well that I think just becomes more relevant. Maybe this ties back into where the pod started, around like what to build, and there's like a Rick Rubinization of everything here.
Which is good, because I like Rick.
Yeah, me too.
He seems like a good egg, all round good egg. 10 out of 10. Would recommend.
Would recommend. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I feel like this is the human agency aspect to this as well. It's like there is a certain degree of freedom here to just go and explore the stuff.
Would you say that that's the human edge? Would you?
Oh,
Available in all good show notes.
Yeah.
Link.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
All right. I feel like we're drawing towards the end of something here.
I think so. Well, it's just we could go off on like a bunch of different tangents, but I'm kind of cognizant of not doing that.
Well,
making it
let's say
confusing.
like Monday next week, we'll re-listen to this,
Yeah.
and then go, okay, here's all the stuff we haven't finished, and we'll do that.
Yeah.
next week.
Well, there's I do think we could probably go into more detail on the multi-agent system stuff. I think that'd be.
Yeah.
It's also topical at the moment because I think Claude released a paper on this as well, and
Yep.
it feels like it's becoming more of a publicly debated thing now. So we should maybe dive into it in more detail.
I mean, it's definitely interesting. Like it's like one of my bits this like last few weeks has been figuring out like, okay, well, what is my like mental model here for, what's a pipeline, what's a flow, what's a conversation, what's a message, like what's the role of everything inside this big juggernaut of stuff that needs to be analyzed, like what's memory, what's this, like how does it all interact?
Yeah.
But and like how does it like feel human at the end of the day? Because I think that's going to make the difference. But it's good. Like let's start to unpack that a little bit.
That sounds good. All right.
All right.
Episode 11 next week. That's good.
That's episode 10 done. That's the good stuff.
Looking forward to it.